Hey, my name is Brian Jewett. I'm a research scientist in atmospheric sciences, and I've had the good benefit and opportunities to work with NCSA and to work with a lot of faculty in atmospheric sciences on a lot of computational problems. So some of the things we're working on include hurricanes, include severe thunderstorms, and the last year winter storms.
Kevin Hofstetter, I'm from Caterpillar Incorporated, and Caterpillar has been an industrial partner with NCSA, I think, since 1989, 89-90 time frame. I'm in our virtual product development area, and what we're looking to do is be able to move to a position where we're able to simulate, actually design our machines through modeling and simulation, so when we finally cut iron and build, we're able to validate that we truly did build the machine the way that, or design the machine the way it should have been. A lot of what's happening today in product design is that we'll design something, we'll build it, and then we go out and we test it. It doesn't work, we come back, we do another iteration. Extremely costly to do that, and it's also very, very time consuming, and we're not able to optimize the design. Once we get to the end, the design's kind of set and we put band-aids on it. So again, we're trying to do the modeling and simulation up front, and NCSA has been a real help in having us advance that whole technology. We still have a long ways to go, but we have come a long ways from when we started.
My name is Jian Ma. I'm from the Department of Bioengineering. I joined the faculty here over a year ago as an assistant professor. I was fortunate enough to be supported as a faculty fellow at NCSA right after I joined here to help me hit the ground running to launch my career here. And over the past year, I have been working with NCSA with great support from Tom, and I've been working with Michael Welge and Victor Jongenel to promote the computational genomics research on campus.
I'm Guy Garnett. I'm from the School of Music. I'm originally a composer. I've been doing a lot of different things at NCSA, working with eDream and Donna Cox, working with IACAT and the group in cultural informatics with Mike Ross and others. And my main interest here is in how to extend the performance and creative capabilities of musicians and dancers and performers. So we use a lot of computational tools to give them added capability, the ability to drive various kinds of display and visualizations and sonifications directly from their already existing performative skills.
I'm Xiaowen Wang, a faculty member in the Department of Geography here, also a resident scientist in this building. My research focuses on geographic information systems and science, large and multi-scale geospatial problem solving that is oftentimes computationally intensive. Several years ago I came here, I was a beneficiary of the NCSA fellowship program that allowed me to explore very interesting collaborations with multiple groups of NCSA, including the infrastructure group. John Towns was running. Even before that, we had collaborations, and also cyber environments technologies group, cyber applications group. So I really find this place is my home, and it's so exciting to my research work.
Thank you very much. We'll have questions from the audience at the end of this discussion, but I'm going to start with asking kind of a few standard questions from each of you, trying to understand how you really interact, not with NCSA as an organization, but also with the computational resources that exist here, and how this has an impact on your work, on your interactions with your colleagues, and so forth. So maybe I'll start with Xiaoweng. Why did you come to NCSA, and what are you getting out of this place?
I think what I do is very much linked to this notion of coupled social environmental systems, which is actually very relevant to lots of our real life experiences, to be able to tell why things are where and what factors determine those things are coming to where they are. For instance, how do you determine a business location for Walmart, and what factors affecting those decisions would be one example. Tom mentioned also infectious disease simulation, what patterns they might emerge. geographically are those kinds of problems. And because of technologies advances like Google Map and Earth, Microsoft Bing, to pick a few, and we're able to harness massive information. How many of you have heard of Openstreetmap? See a couple of hands. So that's one of the technologies when Haiti earthquake happened. There was a little coverage of road network, transportation information for Haiti, but only a week through volunteer information, the road network information became available through this Openstreetmap open infrastructure, and that allowed external emergency management response resources, medical resources shipped to the right places for those people who were in danger or need support. So I think my research is exploiting between the information system side and the high-end simulation side to exploit that interfaces to help us understand really those tough problems require both. One, information system side is focused on this representation management information, whereas the high-end computing side is supporting us understand better at massive scale what's going to happen. I think I'm intrigued by NCSA actually is covering this broad spectrum, help me build that sort of interface, which is really fascinating.
I first came to NCSA as a faculty fellow, and what really attracted me was some demos that were given in the cave back in the old Beckman building. And the cave is this immersive, interactive environment. And I immediately started thinking, how could I use this as a musical instrument? What could this possibly do if I could use it like a musician would use it? So I got a fellowship, and I started working with various people at the time. Hank Kazmarski was very involved in that. And I developed something I called the virtual score, which was an application that lets you go into the cave and be surrounded by representations of the music that you could define. You could create those representations while hearing what they were doing. Just by moving through the space using the cave wand, you would create shapes and you interpret them musically and visually at the same time. And then I added this extra feature where once you had made this creation, you would actually perform it again, but now in sequence and under the control of conductor-like gestures. So I've done a little bit of conducting in my past, and this enabled me to stand inside the cave and make gestures like this and drive forward through this score, hearing it all around me, and seeing it stream toward me. So a traditional score is kind of two-dimensional, and you kind of read it like a book, just left to right, left to right, left to right. But in this case, the score comes at you in time. And when a particular part of the score reaches you, that's the part that sounds. So you get to be looking ahead at what's coming and preparing yourself for that and thinking, okay, am I going to speed up? Am I going to slow down? Do I make this a bigger emphasis on that gesture or what? But it's streaming at you and you're immersed in the entire score. So the score, in effect, becomes part of the performance, part of the work of art, in fact. And I've kind of taken from that, we no longer use the cave, but we do some things up in 2103 with a panoramic display that enables us to interface through dance gestures, or through other kinds of musician gestures. For example, I work closely with a grad student who's a violinist, Ben Smith, and we now perform on the violin, analyze those sounds and those gestures through various kinds of sensors, and drive the simulation on, recently we've been driving simulations on Abe, for example, where you have thousands of objects that you're controlling the relationship of the objects, and you're simultaneously visualizing that and hearing the sound of the violin and transformations of that sound. So we're really looking at ways that we can use this new computing technology to extend what it means to be a performer, a dancer, a musician, an actor, whatever that is, and augment the human capability through this extended environment that we're creating.
This year it actually is also the 10 years anniversary of the first publication of initial human genome. So actually in the past 10 years, as Tom mentioned in his talk, the genomics has been transformed into, in some sense, an information science. So people are, through DNA sequencing, people are trying to generate hypotheses using a lot of data and then try to validate the hypothesis using high-performance computing. So in my own research, high-performance computing is a important part, and I think for the whole community is also a critical part. And as a promise for personal genomics, personal medicine, I think this trend will continue, and there will be a tremendous amount of data coming in the next 5-10 years.
This was interesting for me when I look back when we first started NCSA, when Caterpillar did. And I was involved in some of the early days, but I didn't know why we had made the decision to participate. So I went back to several of the early liaisons, one of them Rich Ingram, who was the first liaison, and some of you who've been around for a long time will remember him. And Rich made a comment which I thought was interesting. He said when they were, in those days, they were looking at the whole supercomputing scene, and there was one particular vendor. We considered perhaps we should buy one of those things. And then the question was, well, what are the options? So one option was, let's go buy it. The other option is we sit and wait. The other one is, let's join NCSA and see if it makes sense to buy this thing. And within a matter of months, we decided it didn't make sense to buy one. And from there, then the whole relationship with NCSA, we made some, I think some of the first real strides we made was in the visualization area, and that has resulted in we've got 4 or 5 immersive caves throughout Caterpillar now. That's very, very successful. We were doing some work with combustion, CFD work, but that work then eventually led into us being able to, through modeling and simulation, develop our clean diesel ACERT on-highway technology, which was a real advancement for the whole emissions and clean diesels at Caterpillar. I think highlights here was our Champaign Simulation Center, which Walt Lohman is still managing that out in the park here. We brought a number of students through, when we had the offices at NCSA, we brought a number of students through there, and we have multiple of those that are still working at Caterpillar. So it was an excellent place to bring students, let them experience what this modeling and simulation means, what high-performance computing means, and then bring them back into Caterpillar. Now at the Champaign Simulation Center, we're still continuing to do some of that. So probably a lot more that we can talk about, but we have gleaned a lot of value out of the relationship.
Many years ago, I was working at the Forecast Systems Labs in Boulder, Colorado, which is sort of a hotbed for atmospheric research and operations, or transferred operations. And I found out there was an even better opportunity coming up, and that was a chance to work on my PhD with Robert Williamson, who's sitting over here in the corner. And he was one of the founders, or one of the co-writers of the cloud model that was used pretty much, I think, around the world probably at the time. And so that was the start of my introduction to NCSA, and it's been a really fabulous experience working on many, many different kinds of computers, but also chances to work with the visualization team. In the past, many years ago, there was a 1989, going way back, video that was put together, which I think still stands strong today, and was up for an Academy Award at one point. And I think there's more opportunities to work on more visualization here in the near future, and continuing to use NCSA computers to study a number of phenomena which we don't really understand all the answers. Director Dunning made a comment about, some of the times we put what we think should produce a tornado and it does, and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it's chaos and sometimes it's not. And I think a lot of the understanding will come from numerical simulation, and that's something that we're pursuing very strongly in collaboration with NCSA now.
Okay, one point that comes across is that it's not just the compute cycles that are important, but it's the environment in which these compute silos are embedded, and the people, the facilities, the visualization, and the fact that you can bring a project from a small beginning to something fully realized. And I think that this is really important. Another question I'd like to ask, and maybe we'll start with Guy this time, is you are all heavy users of the computational infrastructure here, and many of your colleagues are not. And how do you see this influences how you interact with them, how you can maybe proselytize, how you can have a different perspective on your work than you would have if you did not have access to this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what I've found mostly is that bringing people over, giving them demos, which we do fairly frequently, gets them interested and enticed about the potential of using some of these resources in their own work. But there's a very big step between that and actually finding a way to bear down on it and get something done with it. Because often my colleagues, for example, in the School of Music, typically don't have a computing background at all. They use computers for notation, perhaps, or word processing, but very few of them use it beyond that. So one way we've approached that is to create systems that actually allow them to use the skills that they do have in order to drive the computing system. So we use things like various kinds of machine learning techniques to train. So we brought dancers in and had the dancers, we outfit them with sensors all over their body, and we have them move around the way they would like to move around and try to define what those movements might mean to them and how they might want those interpreted. But they don't have to know how to do the computing, they just know how to move. So then we apply machine learning techniques to train the algorithms to understand or segment those gestures and classify them and relate them to each other. And then the performer is really just responding to how the machine is responding to them after going through this training step. So there are ways to bring them in, and there are ways to create the interfaces to the computing technology that make use of existing skills without necessarily telling them, well, you've got to learn, Bayesian probability. Yeah, great. As soon as you're done your next dance performance, sit down with these texts, and you'll be there in another year or so. But that usually doesn't work. Sometimes people come in and they start to learn, especially some of the grad students. They get involved and they start playing a little bit more with it and a little bit more, and they start digging down a little. And that's really part of my goal here, to reach the students and bring them up. And one of the things that I'm involved in, I'm directing a new PhD program we have here in informatics. And this is a very applications of computing orientation. We're really looking for all kinds of areas where computers can be brought to bear. So we have areas like cultural informatics, we have areas like social informatics, any place where computation can be brought into the picture and actually have a real strong impact on the research being done in the field. And now we have a brand new degree program that's interdisciplinary, has many different faculty involved, Xiaowen's involved, Donna's involved, and we're looking for more faculty involvement and ways to reach students who have typically fallen between the cracks. So someone who might have applied to the School of Music but really wanted to do more computation, or someone who decided not to go the music route but is doing musical applications of computers. Where did they fit before? Well, this turns out to be a perfect program for them. So that's another way of reaching out to them and building the community from within, developing the grad students, giving them a place to come, interact with people, get their training, and be able to go out and really develop the computing skills simultaneously with their domain expertise.
About a year ago, it's hard to believe, I was climbing on a C-130 aircraft that we had flying out of Peoria, and we were taking off and collecting observations on winter storms. And it's one of those cases where you think you know what you're going to see pretty much. And we were totally stunned by what we ended up collecting. There was a cloud radar instrument which looked up and down, and there were other probes on all the wings and things like that. And so I work with folks who are primarily observationalists in atmospheric sciences, though they head up some modeling as well. But we saw some things that we don't yet completely understand, and so we're just starting the modeling process, and that's going to be really exciting, because among the things you can do with modeling is you can change the environments in which these things occur, and you can see whether you're reproducing them correctly, and see if we really understand and test hypotheses that we think are important for what's going on there. So that's one of the ways in which we're really using NCSA resources, and we're trying to understand something that I think everybody thought they knew was what was explaining this particular phenomena, and it turns out it really wasn't that at all. The other thing I would mention is that in terms of bringing in new people who don't have much computational experience, Bob Wilmson and myself have 2 graduate students, and soon we'll have a 3rd, we believe. And it's a great draw to be able to say you will be working with folks at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. You will see state-of-the-art visualization. You may be able to contribute to state-of-the-art computing and visualization in the field that you're wanting to work in. And so that's a really exciting aspect of it.
We've been designing products for many, many years. We've been very successful at it. And there is a product development cycle that we go through. There's a process people do. They're used to designing the machine, building it, and testing it. And now we come along and say, you know what, there might be a better way. Maybe you should put this modeling and simulation up front. And then the question is why? And if we look at the product design, our goal is to build an optimized design faster and cheaper. And if we can't prove that we're going to be doing it more optimized, faster, and cheaper with modeling and simulation, it's not going to happen. So trying to convince that community is something that we have as a daily chore. First off, I think we need there's a hurdle of these individuals who are steeped in the test method, which has worked, having them understand that simulation results are also real. And that's a tough one. So test data, that's real. Simulation, not sure about that. So we have to convince them of that, and that happens through a lot of validation and being able to convince them by showing side by side, here's what the test said, here's what the simulation said. Another thing, we have many people across the company who are doing modeling and simulation, but they're quite comfortable using their workstation. And then the question is, well, what happens if we bring a Blue Waters in? Now, Caterpillar, I think that 1% of Blue Waters, I think, exceeds the capacity of Caterpillar right now. But if we bring in this very large, massive number of cores, what could we do with that? And so Galen Fadley here and myself, we've been working with several individuals in order to develop some pilot projects where we take some technology and say, let's just make the biggest problem we can. Dump this on a computer, run it as fast as we can, and then take the results, visualize them, and look at the results and try to understand, is there something we learned by doing this that we could never learn any way else? And that's something we're hoping to do one of those this year. Hopefully we can even get a few more in. But it is a challenge to try to move people from the way that's always worked to a way that is far better than that way that always worked. So we're working on that.
I think as a computational biologist, one of the challenges is actually to bridge the gap between computational scientists and experimental biologists. And since I came here, quite a few times I've been asked by some experimental biologists to for a problem like how to automate a process that they are currently doing by hand. So I think like how to help them design an efficient algorithm utilizing computing resources in order to speed up the process that they're currently doing manually. And the other thing I think is visualization. I think it will facilitate scientific discovery for biologists, and also I also think visualization is a good way to disseminate the results to the general public.
I have a whole bunch of questions, and of course we're not going to have time to go through all of them. But I think maybe one that's really forward-looking is, how do you think that this continuing increase in computational capability and power is going to be transformative in your particular area of research over the next 20 plus years?
If we look at the product development cycle, today we want to move towards where we're designing by analysis. So we run some simulations, the designer makes some tweaks in his design, we come back, we run some more simulations. 25 years from now, what would be an incredible vision to achieve is that as we go through the product design, we're building the model as we're designing. And I think about some software engineering, and you're developing a software, and there are incremental tests that are occurring every night. You go home and it runs, and the morning comes back and says, you know, you got these problems with your codes. Why can't we do that with product development? And as you're developing the model and you're changing things in your design, you go home, you come back in the morning, all of these simulations have run, which are determining all these different criteria that you have to meet for the design that says, you know, you're not optimized here, here, or there. And you come back in the morning and you make these changes. And it's a continual process, interactive, real-time, that every change you know, or that you make, you know what the impact of that is. And effectively real-time optimization of our product design. And even beyond that, I'm thinking of product design, but that could go through the whole business. And so you could start putting the marketing in place, the sales, everything tied together, even to where we tie into our customer base and we observe how's the customer using his machine and project forward what the products are that he ought to have and how they ought to work, and it comes back into the design cycle and through this whole automated process, not fully automated because we will have the visionary engineer in the middle of it, but the product comes out the back door to meet what the customer needs.
I have two thoughts, I guess. One is how we do science is changing quickly, and I think that integrating everything together is something that hasn't always been really an option. So to have a slight segue, at one time I went to Thinking Machines, and they had very powerful volume renderers, and I brought them a stack of contour plots, and they were fascinated by it. They thought that was the greatest thing ever because they couldn't do that. They could do all these other things, which is funny now because, of course, we do all these things. But it's still true that we need a lot of different ways to look at data, and we often would like to tie together all the many things that we do into one big package. So I have the advantage right now of working with Al Rossi and Jay Alameda, and we have there's a system they've developed for tying together the whole workflow of how we do science. And so it goes from preparing the data and doing the computation and hopefully doing the visualization and archiving everything and putting it all on a web page and making it all available to you. And that's going to be the way things will be done normally, probably within 10 years and certainly within 25. And I think that prototypes of that are being developed and used right now. Another thing I think that will be possible is with machines like Blue Waters and whatever may follow, we can really look at weather processes that we do badly now. I think there's a real risk that we are able to simulate things and get reasonable looking answers and get them for the wrong reason, and we don't know whether we're doing that or not. And on the scale of a tornado, I've seen tornadoes that can develop very fast, and a lot of people standing 100 yards away, well, a mile away from them can't necessarily tell if they're about to develop, and being able to slow that whole process down and do the high performance computation, but also all the data and also all the visualization we need in order to understand that, that's something that will really be possible. And so I think we'll be able to probably improve our understanding and hopefully the forecasting of phenomena like that, and also hurricanes, which are a very big problem. Forecast tracks are done very well now. Forecast intensity is done very poorly, has not improved in the last 20 years. I think that's a huge area, and that's something where really fast computing will really make a difference.
I have a question as an answer, very expensive question I have. How do we design our future world with the support of cutting-edge tools to make decisions for a living, sustainable world, where we have very detailed sensing of citizen-level information, And then we would be able to support decision-making at the country level, regional level, world level. That's going to get us to optimal path, beneficial to our future generations. This is a very expensive question. It's more expensive than the cost of supercomputing resources. And we see islands of models being built for environment, hydrology, disease diffusion. But it would be nice to bring these models together, combined with rich information to tune these models to predict our future and support decision-making, because our future path cannot be experimented very much. Once we lock down to a road, it's very hard to reverse. So I'd like to pick up the word Kevin used, design. In our community, geographic information science and geospatial problem-solving community, now we're picking up this term geodesign, which is to create sustainable multi-scale solution based on cutting-edge information simulation systems. I think we have a lot to learn from other communities, especially interfacing to HPC resources and capabilities. I see our needs for doing such a vision or to answer this very expensive question has a long way to go. I see the demand for the next multiple levels of HPC resources is ever increasing. Think about how many people are migrating these days, the transportation global network it offers, and to be able to keep track of these people moving and the resource consumption across multiple levels and scales. The simulation of that is going to be as challenging as you would simulate stars formation. It could be more complicated because you're doing very detailed, now we have today your GPS phones, we're doing very detailed instrumentation. How do we bring that information into the simulation world and feed back the information results to the information world, support decision making? I think it's a very daunting and intriguing challenge question we're going after.
I think computation that is now being run on high-performance systems will gradually devolve to being run on personal, highly interactive systems. As we move forward, that's been largely the case. And it seems to me that process is one that we should be planning for, too, as we move forward. Thinking about how this becomes individualized, how what we can get our grip on today using lots and lots of processors in a dedicated facility may end up being usable by individuals on a very personal level. I have two graduate students in computer science working on augmented reality. What they do is they use cameras, multiple cameras usually, to take images of a scene and derive models of that scene on the computer, and then manipulate those models, and then reproject images onto that scene so that they look at this desk and they figure out what the surface is, what the area of the desk is, where its edges are, various things like that, and then they project onto the desk various images, whatever images they determine. They turn the desk itself into a computer interface. They project onto the walls and make that computer interface as well. That kind of moving out from the central facilities to individual empowerment, take it with you, turn anything around you into some kind of computable surface, a computable device. It seems to me that's really exciting too, especially from the perspective of the arts. We often have trouble getting enough computation power into performing arts venues, for example. We're very lucky to get a 10 gigabit connection from here down to the Krannert Art Center, Krannert Center for Performing Arts. And we've been using that to do performances over that very high bandwidth connection between here and there, and between other facilities with high bandwidth connection. Sending HD video images over back and forth with low latency and various things like that. This is going to spread out more and more and become more and more available. We're sort of prototyping the next works of art, the next ways of interacting with art right here by having these facilities available, by enabling us to bring in artists and say, okay, what if you have this, what could you do? And putting it together and making productions out of it and putting those productions out there in some way. And just sort of, it feels like trailblazing. We're out there trying out these things, leading the way, and then we find them trickling out to the rest of the world. So that to me is one of the most exciting things, being able to really explore the boundaries and see what impacts that can have, and then see that impact gradually disseminate out into the rest of the world.
I think the exciting role of computation in biology and medicine in the next few years is really to help answer one of the central questions in biology is how phenotype is generated by genotype. And I think there are three sort of interconnected questions. The first one is how we got here, as essentially the question of human evolution, why we are different from other species, and we can sort of find the answer in our genomes and projects like 10,000 genome project to sequence 10,000 vertebrate genomes in the next few years. The purpose of that is to figure out the genetic differences between human and other species and to better understand human evolution, of course, the evolution of other species as well. And the second question is the genetic variation in a human population, why we are different as individuals, and what's the difference, what's the implication of that to, for example, disease predisposition, and we have that kind of have a better understanding for that kind of questions in the next few years. And projects like 10,000 Genome, which is already ongoing, and the purpose of that is to answer that. But people have thought that 1,000 genomes is not enough, so people are calling to sequence 1 million human individual genomes in order to profile the genetic variance to understand the variation in the human population. And the third question is, of course, to better understand the disease genomes, like to figure out the disease mechanism, such as cancer. For example, the project like the Cancer Genome Atlas project to try to detect the DNA glitches in these tumor genomes to find out why the tumor genomes are different from the normal ones, and what are the sort of the driving forces of those genetic changes that make the cells cancerous. And so as you can see, all these projects will generate tons of data, and the bottleneck is really not in generating data, because you probably have heard that the cost of sequencing is dropping dramatically. So we can envision that in a few years, probably the cost of sequencing the entire genome will be around $100. So it's really a choice that you can spend money to have a nice dinner in a good restaurant, or you can have your genome sequenced. And so the bottleneck is not in the process of it's not generating the data. The bottleneck is how we can design good computational methods to interpret data and to make the most sense out of it.